And now getting back to our coverage of You Decide 2014, Republicans are keeping control of the state legislature. Mark Leland joins us now this morning with more on what yesterday's elections mean for people here in Wisconsin. Good morning, Mark.
And good morning to you, Rachel. The balance of power did not shift in the state assembly or the state senate yesterday in the voting. St. Norbert College political science professor Wendy Scattergood joins me this morning in the studio to talk more about the election. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning.
Give us an idea. The balance of power had been in Republican control in the complete legislature. It's staying in control. In fact, they gained some seats. Is that a vote of confidence for what Governor Walker and his administration has been doing?
Yeah, I think it is, as we saw with his own reelection and as well as the Attorney General's office. I think we're seeing a sweep for the Republicans, and they did gain a couple of seats in the Assembly and a seat in the Senate. So that will make it easier for them to pass legislation. If they have defectors from their own party, they'll still be able to pass that legislation.
Because we saw the first 2 years of Walker's administration, he passed a number of bills and moved his agenda along. The last 2 years since the recall, not so much, but the vote in the state Senate in particular had tightened up where maybe he couldn't do that.
And I think one of the things that elections do is give mandates to the people who win majorities, and they feel that the people have spoken and they want that agenda to move forward. So I think that will give them more momentum to move some of that legislation that they've been debating. Do
you think some of the issues that were concerning the voters that played into this? I mean, they're concerned about the economy in particular.
Yeah, and I think that's their biggest issue, and as we talked about, that I think the momentum of the economy right now is beneficial, I think, and that gives impetus for, they're talking about regulations for businesses, they're talking about tax reform and those kinds of policies. I think that gives them a bigger mandate to push forward with those policies.
You saw in the referendum, some communities held a referendum, they're talking about dealing with business. What does that tell you?
Well, with Neenah and Menasha, for example, is that they had a resolution just saying should the minimum wage be raised to $10.10 an hour, and that did pass in those two communities. So I think for them, that's a statement, and that's what that's about. There was a couple of other communities that talked about taking federal money for Badger Care, for Medicaid. And again, that's just a statement to Madison saying this is what we feel should happen. We did see a number locally in this area. There were a number of cities and towns that had resolutions about saying we should eliminate personhood for corporations, and those passed by really big majorities. So I think that has more to do with campaign finance than it does necessarily for economy.
Do you think the Democratic voice in the state is going to be heard? I mean, you mentioned like minimum wage. That's something Scott Walker was not in favor of increasing, but clearly maybe voters are.
Well, we only have Neenah and Menasha to look at that, and we've asked about that question, and there is actually broad support for it. So we'll see. Probably not is my guess is how that will work out.
Okay. Do you think Walker is going to be able to push through? He's going to be more vigorous like he was the first 2 years in office?
I think so, in particular if he's looking forward toward a presidential bid, although he said he's going to fill out the rest of his 4-year term that he's just won. But if he does do a presidential bid, he'll certainly have to look active and show that he can get policies passed.
And have we seen the last of Mary Burke?
From her concession speech last night, it didn't seem like we have seen the last of her. I think this was sort of her first foray on the statewide stage, and I think we may see more of her in the future. Okay, something to
be watching as we move forward in this, and we'll see how it all turns out in the state legislature as they're all sworn in. Thank you very much. Wendy Scattergood joining us here this morning, and we'll be right back. You're watching Good Day Wisconsin.